Fallout Season 2. The highs, like anything to do with this guy.
Count it, losers.
And the lows, like anything to do with this guy.
Look what it got me.
And the many, many spoilers ahead in case you're just jumping into the season. For the rest of us, if you're anything like me and you've just finished watching Fallout Season 2, then you've probably got some questions like, what was this all supposed to be about again? Which MacGuffin should I be caring about? Should it be the one that does cold fusion, or the one that's in cryo with a tragic backstory, or the one that's some kind of other non-fusion related revolutionary technology thing? Frankly, it's too much. Straight up a central problem with Season 2. Way too much table setting, way too little payoff. So instead, let's focus on a simple but kind of philosophical question that struck me while I was watching this whole thing, which is, who is the real villain of this season? Because the show wants you to say maybe the Enclave, or even Caesar's Legion if you swing that way, or Mr. House. But for me, it's Hank. And not because he's the most powerful, but because he's kind of the most persuasive. I mean, he's not a big, cartoonish, big bad villain with super technologies and sinister silhouettes. He's a more philosophical villain, which is why I got interested in him this season. And I mean it seriously. The man has an ideology, and he has thought all of this through, and he genuinely thinks he's helping. He has an agenda that survived a whole apocalypse, which is what makes him the most terrifying in my view. US President Ronald Reagan once said that the scariest 8 words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Well, in the world of Fallout, what remains of the US government isn't exactly here to help. And those scariest words have become, "I'm from Vault-Tec and I'm here to help." Because Hank MacLean just wants to fix things, to end the complete barbarity of the wasteland. And he knows exactly how to do it too, with a whistle while he works and a smile on his face. And now in Season 2, he finally gets the power to do it as well. And here's what Hank's utopia feels like from the inside.
Kill me.
No, gosh.
Kill.
Why does everybody always want me to kill them all the time?
Previously on Philosophy TV Club, I asked why we keep falling in love with the apocalypse, particularly the Fallout version of the apocalypse. Why the wasteland feels like a holiday from a civilization that won't stop calling. And in our other videos on the channel, I've also been thinking a lot about ideology and about utopias and dystopias. You know, how someone's great idea can quickly turn into everybody else's nightmare. But this time, I want to talk about the person who picks up the phone and says, "Don't worry, I'll handle everything." So let's dive in. With a little help from Dostoevsky, a Grand Inquisitor, the terrible news of Jesus being back, and what people really want, being told what to do. The season picks up right where Season 1 left off. Lucy and the Ghoul are headed to New Vegas in search of Hank. Maximus is kind of trapped in his own little plotline, tangled up with the Brotherhood of Steel. Norm, Lucy's brother, is stuck in Vault 31 with a group of thought-out Vault-Tec executives and a rapidly deteriorating situation. And New Vegas itself turns out to be exactly as complicated and contested as fans of the game would expect. But it's moved on a bit from the actual game, New Vegas. Mr. House is still kind of running the strip. The NCR is trying to reassert itself, but looking pretty pathetic. And Caesar's Legion is marching in from Mojave with a new legate, played at the end memorably by Macaulay Culkin in a laurel wreath. There are a lot of threads here, and that's part of the problem with this season. But Maximus has his own arc about what it means to be a good man inside a corrupt institution and basically being incompetent at everything except smashing things. And the Brotherhood talks about honor and duty, but the longer Maximus is in it, the more he notices kind of the gap between the slogans and the reality. That's a whole nother philosophical video in itself, honestly, like the ethics of loyalty in a broken system. If you'd like to see that one or any of the other videos on some of the bigger ideas raised in the series, then let me know in the comments and I'll give it some thought. Cooper Howard, on the other hand, the Ghoul, has what I think is the season's most emotionally kind of moving subplot, even though it's a bit thin at points. He's searching for his wife and his daughter for 200 years. He's been doing it forever. And the finale finally gives him something he'd almost stopped believing in, a reason to hope. And I'm man enough to admit it, I teared up a bit, but then again I cry at those videos where pets see their veteran owners again after their deployment, so your mileage may vary. The cryopods of his wife and his daughter are empty because we have to keep the MacGuffins going, but there is a postcard from Colorado, so they might be alive. But then again, the show kind of says to us, haha, suckers, wait till season 3 to find out. And even then, Cooper may still have hope, but I'm kind of running out of it a bit with some of these, strung along plot lines. Still, that story specifically for the black-hearted ghoul, what hope means after 2 centuries of cynicism and what it costs to let yourself care again, that's kind of rich enough for its own episode too. So tell me if you're interested in that. Norm's arc is, it's interesting and then it's rad roaches. It's basically the second Deus Ex Machina in the season, except here the Greek god being wheeled in as creatures we've literally beaten to death in Baby's first vault level of the games countless times. So this one could have used a second pass, or to be honest, not have been in the season at all. I don't think we would have missed it, but we'll touch on that in the review section when we get to it. But the thread that I really want to pull on today is Lucy and Hank, father and daughter, because their confrontation in the finale isn't just the emotional climax of the season, it's a genuine philosophical argument. It's a dramatized between 2 people who love each other about whether freedom is worth the suffering that it causes. It's also kind of the most fully realized story of the arcs presented, the only one that doesn't ask us to subscribe to another year of Amazon Prime just to have a damn story circle closed. Okay, calm down. I'm supposed to be a philosopher, damn it. I'm sorry. But I had a lot of philosophical thoughts about Hank's projects and what it might mean in a place like the Wasteland, indeed within the lore of Fallout, because I think this one is deeply philosophical. And to understand why the story as a philosophical argument works, I want to introduce you to a character from Russian literature who's been making essentially the same case Hank does since 1880. He's called the Grand Inquisitor, and he has a lot in common with Hank MacLean, except he doesn't need a brain chip. He's got something worse. He's got an ideological point to make. In 1880, Fyodor Dostoevsky publishes The Brothers Karamazov, his last novel. It's his masterpiece. It's an iconic book that you've probably heard of. And buried inside that book is a parable that philosophers and theologians and apparently television writers have not been able to stop thinking about and arguing about since that was published, because that's what we do. It's called The Grand Inquisitor, and it's deceptively simple. Imagine this: Christ returns to Earth, not at the end of days, just a little sneakily, like an undercover boss so that everybody can't just look busy. He shows up in Seville during the height of the Spanish Inquisition, and he walks through the streets, but he can't help doing what he does. He is Jesus Christ, after all. He heals a blind man and he raises a child from the dead. The standard JC stuff. And then the people start to recognize him. Indeed, they flock to him. And then the Grand Inquisitor, a cardinal, 90 years old, and the most powerful man in the church in Spain, has him arrested. Not because of hatred or because of disbelief or anything like that, but because for him, Christ showing up is kind of really bad for business. And then, in a long, extraordinary monologue in the book, with Christ sitting silent in his cell the entire time, the Inquisitor explains why. The Inquisitor's argument goes a little like this. He says, you, Christ, offered humanity freedom, which means the freedom to choose good or to choose evil, and to believe or not to believe, essentially to find your own way. And that was cruel, because most people can't handle freedom. Freedom is agonizing. It means doubt. It means responsibility, and it means living with the consequences of your own, frankly, frequently terrible decisions. What people want, what they've always wanted, the Grand Inquisitor argues, is bread and some miracles and a bit of authority. Feed me, impress me, and for God's sake, please tell me what to do. That's what he thinks people want. That's the deal. And the Inquisitor says that most of us, we'd take that in a heartbeat, because choosing for ourselves is exhausting and we're honestly not very good at it. And the church, the Inquisitor says, the church understands this. They took the burden off everybody's shoulders a long time ago. The church gave them all certainty, and all it cost them was obedience. We gave them comfort, and all it cost was, everything else. And they were grateful. They were happy. And then you, Christ, you would have left them free and miserable. We, the church, made them unfree and content. So, this Grand Inquisitor asks, which of us actually loved and cared for them more? It's one of the most extraordinary passages in all of literature, to be honest. And the reason it endures, the reason people are still writing about it, and I'm talking about it a century and a half later in dumb YouTube videos like this one, is that Dostoevsky doesn't let us dismiss the Grand Inquisitor speech straight out of hand as a Bond villain monologuing, or whatever the 19th century equivalent of that is. Professor Moriarty, maybe? Anyway, Dostoevsky, on the other hand, was a devout Christian. He believes in Christ's answer, but he gave the opposition the strongest possible case. He made the Inquisitor brilliant, compassionate, even a little bit tragic if we look at it a certain way. He made him someone who genuinely believes what he is doing is the right thing. And does that sound familiar? Because Hank MacLean is making the Grand Inquisitor's argument, almost word for word in the series. Just, swap out the church for Voltec and the bread for brain chips. The Inquisitor says freedom causes suffering, while Hank says freedom causes war and everything that happens in the wasteland, constant chaos, which is the same argument just after the bombs fell. And the Inquisitor's currency was bread and obedience, whereas Hank is implants and safety. The bit that really gets me, though, the parallel, if you will, is what they do. They both frame it as love. They say, essentially, I did this because I love them. I'm saving them because somebody has to. It's a service, right? It's sacrifice, except that the people being saved don't get a vote. And the question for me is always this: who holds the dial? Who gets to set the settings? And both of them, and this is also the crucial part, both of them are confronted by somebody who refuses that deal. Christ sits in silence, almost in judgment. He doesn't argue back. He just doesn't comply with the Grand Inquisitor. And Lucy, standing outside the Lucky 38, looking at the father she still loves but kind of condemns in a world that genuinely does seem to prove him right, she says no. Now, here's what I want to be honest with you about for a second, because the very easy version of this video is the one where I say something like, Hank is a fascist. We have been talking about ideology and fascism a lot on the channel after all. And then we all nod and we agree and we move on. Ha ha ha, what a great critique a Fallout is. But the show is, at least in this single plot line, maybe not in some other places, I think it's being a little smarter than that. So I think we should be too in our philosophical analysis. Because it's now personal honesty time. Yes, I'm going to want to hear your answers to this question in the comments because it comes from my personal experience too, and I like hearing about yours. But my question is this: in the worst, most exhausting moments of your life, the ones where everything feels too complicated and too broken and too much, we've all been there. Have you ever wanted someone else to just take the wheel? To make the decisions so that you don't have to? Not forever, maybe, but just for a little bit, just until things feel kind of manageable. Maybe it even just manifests itself as a desire to just stay in bed and let the world roll on around you. Or just have a chip that somebody can switch on and suddenly everything's happy, everything's simple. Yes, I think we've all been there. And that's the feeling that Hank is exploiting. Well, the reason it's dangerous is not that the feeling is wrong, but that it is real and that it's often where we are at that very moment. There's no getting around it. The Grand Inquisitor's power in that piece of writing is that he's articulating something that most of us have felt and have been almost too embarrassed to admit, that freedom is heavy. The choosing is exhausting. And that someone offering to carry that weight for you will always find at least some takers in the wasteland and elsewhere. And the show's achievement, and I think this is one of the genuine triumphs of this season, is that it lets Hank's argument kind of breathe long enough to feel at least a little bit plausible. We get to see life in the management vault and how everybody is kind of happy in this mindless state. Lucy does pause at the first moment and stop herself from bringing it all down, at least at first. Also, it helps that we have Carl MacLachlan. I mean, Carl MacLachlan plays Hank not as a monster, but as a man who has thought carefully and arrived at an answer that he believes in completely. He's warm, he's patient, he's kind of like the perfect dad, and he's offering us a world where nothing bad happens anymore. And all we have to do is to give up the thing that we were basically using to make bad things happen in the first place. So it's a great bargain, isn't it? And if the argument is this strong, if it's seduced cardinals and philosophers, and for one terrible moment on the steps of the Lucky 38 almost seduced Lucy, then what's actually wrong with it? Well, let's talk about freedom, particularly in the context of Fallout, because as a game, the franchise is a great illustration of the weight of freedom. It gives you lots of choices and different types, and it gives consequences for those choices. So, freedom. And in 1958, a Latvian-born philosopher called Isaiah Berlin gave a very famous lecture at Oxford University that drew a line through the middle of the word freedom because he thought we were mixing up two very basic but very different things. Berlin said that there were two kinds of liberty or of freedom. The first he called negative liberty or freedom from. This is where nobody tells you what to do. Nobody interferes with your choices. You might make terrible decisions. If you're me, you probably will, but they're yours. And in achieving freedom from, the damned world finally leaves us alone. The second type of freedom he called positive liberty or freedom to. And this is stuff like the freedom to flourish or to reach our potential, to become the best version of ourselves. A much bigger conception of freedom. And on the surface, this one sounds obviously better. Because, of course, we want people to flourish. Of course, we want lives that aren't just left alone, but that are actually good. But here's Berlin's warning, and it's the one that matters for Hank and for Fallout and for our story arc. Because positive liberty, Berlin argued, is the one that tyrants use. Yeah, I bet you didn't see that one coming. Because the moment you say, I know what your true potential is, and I'm going to help you reach it, whether you agree or not, you've kind of crossed a line. You've stopped liberating someone and you've started treating them as an improvement project on your schedule, by your definition, and honestly thinking that they should be kind of thanking you for it. And if they resist, well, then they just don't understand their own best interests yet, do they? So we make them understand. And in the tyrant's view, we're not oppressing them. We're freeing them from their own ignorance, from their own weakness and their own freedom, in fact, which is just making them miserable. That's a kind of curse, a philosophical curse that's been handed down to us generation to generation by Plato and that has been echoing through debates in political philosophy ever since. And I think you'd struggle to find a paternalist regime in history that hasn't made some version of this argument. It's basically the whole playbook. They say, we're not controlling you, we're perfecting you. It's for your own good. You'll thank us later. And that is basically, in this season, Hank's pitch distilled to its essence. He's not saying, I want power. He's doing it for the good of mankind. He's saying, I want you to be safe, and I know what safe looks like better than you do, sugar bomb. Because the brain chips don't just remove our choices, they also remove the anguish of choosing, and everybody seems pretty happy about this. And if you are interested in the anguish of choosing, this is something that we talked about a lot in our existentialism videos, for example, something that's unavoidable. So it makes it a whole nother level of tyranny. And everybody's happy about this except for Martha. And I'm sorry, I know her name isn't Martha, but I love this actress, and for me, she will forever be Zach Galifianakis' best friend on the criminally underrated show Baskets, which you should check out if you haven't seen it. I just like to think that she escaped from that Costco office and got elected to Congress, and then basically got imprisoned in a futuristic version of a Costco office. Oh well. But, we're not grading Hank according to our world here, but to his. And this is where, excuse the pun, his argument has claws. Because in a world where choosing wrong means a death claw eats your family or a raider burns down your settlement, I'm sorry, Preston, I was going to get to it. There's a version of that offer which sounds almost kind and pretty good. But Berlin's whole point is that this logic, it has no brake pedal. There's no natural stopping point. Once you accept that someone else understands your real interests better than you do, you've handed over everything. Kierkegaard knew this, and the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre called this figure the champion of sincerity, and it always ends poorly. Because where does it end? This season, we see that it ended with the assembly line and with rows and rows of smiling people who will never be unhappy again because they'll never really be anything again. But next season, I think we're going to see worse. So in short, the freedom and happiness that Hank offers is, in many philosophers' views, the freedom and happiness of a kind of lobotomy. And the worst part is, Agent Cooper means well. Sorry, I mean Hank. Damn fine cup of coffee. So Berlin tells us how the argument works, how I'm helping you curdles into I own you pretty quickly. And I think we can see that all for ourselves. But there is a deeper question underneath. Not just how Hank gets away with it, but why it's wrong. Even if it works, even if it delivers exactly the peace he promises. Now, the philosopher Immanuel Kant had a principle for this, and I've mentioned it a few times on the channel before. It's called the categorical imperative. And trust me, it's simpler than it sounds, but here goes. It is that we must treat people always as ends in themselves, never merely as means. That means never reduce a person to a tool or a part of your scheme, a thing that exists to serve your vision of how the world should look. So, armed with that ripper, again, excuse the pun, we can have a closer look at Hank's operation. Because his workers aren't really people anymore, are they? They're just parts. They're just components in Hank's grand project. And if you want to see what that looks like at its most visceral, the show gives you Congresswoman Welch's severed head, kept alive, wired into a mainframe, and still conscious enough to beg for death. A person literally reduced to a computer component. That's Kant's nightmare made flesh. And then there's Lucy, who hears Hank's Norman Rockwell-esque pitch, has grown up with it really, has been trained into it, and she feels the pull of it. She nearly buckles under and agrees to it. But then she comes out the other side with what I think is the best line of the season.
I have to admit, you always were a good father. Thanks to you, I'm not a fudging idiot.
See? A snappy quip? Sure it is. But also, it's Hank reaping what he has sown. The villain getting his comeuppance in the most ironic way available. That, Fallout Season 2, I can respect. Maybe you get a pass for the other stuff, which we'll get to. But Hank raised her. He taught her compassion. He taught her decency. He taught her the importance of treating people well. And those values, his values, are exactly what make her capable of seeing through him. He handed his daughter the moral tools to dismantle everything he's been building. So we can't teach someone that people matter and then show them a room full of people who've been turned into basically furniture or an assembly line. But question time again, because the Fallout TV show does raise a lot of really good questions, even if it sometimes misfires in trying to answer them. But riddle me this. If you could push a button and halve the violence in the world, but the cost was halving everybody's ability to choose, would you push it? Now, of course, Hank would. We've seen that. We know that. He'd do it sincerely and sadly, but really without hesitation. The Ghoul, on the other hand, hell no. It's not like he likes the chaos and violence, but it has come to suit him and his agenda. And he does seem to abide by something like the cowboy code, mostly, of staying the hell out of everybody's business unless he absolutely has to. That's negative freedom that Isaiah Berlin would have approved of. For Lucy, for a lot of the show, she probably stands somewhere in the middle, which makes her kind of a useful main character. And maybe, according to whatever rough experience of the wasteland she might be receiving at any given moment, she might have swung in one direction or another. I mean, we kind of do as the viewers, or as the players when we play the games, and often the choices of those games are what makes them special. It's just tough to bring those choices alive in the same way in the TV show. But I digress. Fallout Season 2 does try to do that here, and I respect that. Although, we're not done with Hank just yet, the meekest villain in Fallout history. And don't come at me in the comments with your antagonizer arguments, because I'm sticking with Hank. Because the show isn't done with him either. So Lucy has won the argument and she's refused the chip. She's turned Hank's own device back on him, literally handcuffed him and threatened to implant him with his own technology. For the first time in the entire season, Hank MacLean has no play here, no angle. He's got no pitch. His daughter has outmaneuvered him both morally and eventually physically as well too. So what does he do? He wipes his own memory. It's not a dramatic last stand, really, or a villain's monologue about this time. We don't get another grand Inquisitor moment. He just erases himself. He activates some Enclave failsafe, and then everything that made Hank Hank, every memory and every conviction and every justification, just disappears. Lights on, but nobody's home. It's almost sad to see. Some fans have joked that he Dougie Jones'd himself, which, if you've seen Twin Peaks The Return, also starring Kyle MacLachlan as a man reduced to a pleasant vacant shell, it's both funny and deeply apt. It's Carl's very own version of being Sean Beaned in every performance. But it raises a question that the show is smart enough to leave a little bit unanswered, and it's one that's been bothering philosophers for a long time too, which is this. If you delete the person who did the harm, is that accountability, or is that the ultimate escape? There's a branch of philosophy called personal identity theory. It's most associated with a British philosopher called Derek Parfit, and it asks what actually holds a person together across time? It's a classic philosophical question about identity. And Parfit's answer roughly is psychological continuity, which he understands as like memory or personality. And it's the thread of that experience that connects who you were yesterday to who you are today and who you might be tomorrow. And if that thread breaks, if it really breaks, not just fades, but is actually gone, then in a meaningful sense, the person on the other side of that is someone completely new. Which means the Hank sitting in the chair after the wife, or on the steps of the Lucky 38 in this case, is by Parfit's logic arguably not the man who built the assembly line. That man is gone. Lucy is left holding a body that looks like her father and sounds like her father, but can never answer for anything her father did. And I think the show wants us to hold two readings of this at the same time. There's a generous reading, that Hank saw what he was reflected back at him in the eyes of somebody he loved, and eventually he just couldn't face what he'd become. So the wipe is a kind of self-destruction. It annihilates the self rather than having to live with it. And there is something almost tragic about that. A man so committed to control that when he finally loses it, the only move he has left is to Control-Alt-Delete himself. But then there's the more damning reading. That is that Hank is doing this as a last act of control. He can't control Lucy, which is something he's wanted to do to the point of giving her the chip, and he can't control the outcome. So he controls the one thing he has left, whether anyone gets to hold him accountable. And in this view, I think the wipe isn't repentance, but the last power move of a true villain. It's a man who would rather stop existing than let someone else have the last word. And I've got to say, classic philosopher move. Either way, Lucy doesn't get a clean victory and a quest reward and an experience points at the end. Yes, she won the argument, but the person she was arguing with left the building. It's not very cathartic, and it's not satisfying either. It doesn't give her closure. It's the philosophical equivalent of building an indestructible court case and then finding out the defendant has vanished, which, fair enough. Fallout never gives us a clear win. We clear a dungeon for a faction we like and we find out they're just as bad as the ones we killed. You know, that's classic Fallout. We pick and we spend the rest of the game wondering if we chose wrongly. The Wasteland really doesn't do tidy endings. So neither does this story arc, and it, at least, is a little better for it. Right, so I spent most of this video talking about why the Hank storyline works, and I really do think it does. It's the best thing the season did. It's philosophical and it's personal, and I think it's even slightly political as well. I love that, of course. But the rest, if I'm honest, is a pretty mixed bag, and we could try and build out the philosophy together from frankly scant evidence, but a lot of the detail and world-building just wasn't there this season. A lot of places were set and not paid off, and a lot of it was really rushed. Really, the issue seems to be trying to tell so many separated and parallel stories at once, rather than just having the characters we really like come together for a good reason so we can see them bounce off each other or something. Season 2, I think, got the family stuff between Lucy and Hank right when they finally got together, which took a while too, and that's why I focused on it. I felt it worked and it said something both emotionally and philosophically interesting. But it also forgot it had another of Hank's children out there. Someone who, when they were in the vault together, actually did play the vital role of being a contrast to Lucy's bright moralistic approach. He instead got a pretty dumb plot-driven storyline that seemed a waste of our time. It was really just there for a bit of exposition. And then there was the quest log problem, which really is a flaw that Bethesda have turned into an art form at this point. But now it's showing up in the TV series too, because season 2 is trying to run 4-ish major storylines at the same time, and it's trying to introduce 6 new factions and service a vault subplot all in 8 episodes. And it feels like it has to check in on all of them almost every episode, which seems like too many spinning plates. It also kind of, for me, just reduces Cooper and Maximus to MacGuffin chasers, who have things happen to them that are pretty quickly resolved. And what a waste of Mr. House and the Enclave. Now, they're the villains, of course, but in the games, they're one villain amongst many. They're a different ideology and a different flavour of villain, but, you know, fun to visit, but you wouldn't want to live there. Whereas here in the TV series, they're kind of bafflingly, constantly foreshadowed and spoiled in that foreshadowing as the big bad. It feels like here the show's running into a typical problem, which is it's always trying to outdo itself. Like, in the next season, are we going to get to Raven Rock and discover, oh no, the Enclave has been infiltrated and they're controlled by another big bad, the Institute. They're the real big bad. And that kind of thing is exhausting. It's cheap and unoriginal storytelling. Here I'm hoping they're going to fix it a little and give us some flavour in season 3 rather than just running that same loop again and again. Because at this point, grand conspiracies are starting to feel like a Westworld-esque kind of crutch. We burn out quickly on them. Okay, well, thanks for letting me be a critic for a minute. I had to get that off my chest, but now I get to go back to being a philosopher again and mining what is a genuinely entertaining show, even when it's slacking a little, for little Kwama eggs of wisdom. Oh wait, no, that's the wrong Bethesda property. Hey, where is my 30-episode Morrowind series, Todd? But that's it for Philosophical TV Club this time. So until next time, be wise and be kind, and think twice before anyone offers to do your thinking for you.